On the 7th May 1954, at Dien Bien Phu in northwest Vietnam, a remote valley became the center of a world-changing battle. Its outcome helped end French colonial rule in Indochina and reshaped modern Asia. The valley looked isolated, but the war around it was not. France was fighting to hold a collapsing empire, while Vietnamese revolutionaries sought full independence after years of conflict and occupation. By the early 1950s, the First Indochina War had become a contest of endurance. Foreign support, nationalist ambition, and battlefield exhaustion all pushed the conflict toward a decisive confrontation. French commanders hoped to draw the enemy into a set-piece battle where artillery and air power could decide the outcome. Their opponents planned to turn that confidence into a trap of their own. The valley of Dien Bien Phu sat near mountain routes leading toward Laos and the Chinese border. It was remote, but not empty, and its geography would shape every decision that followed. The French built an air-supplied stronghold in the basin, believing mobility and firepower would compensate for isolation. Around them, the hills stayed in enemy hands, quiet but commanding. The opposing army was larger than many outsiders expected, disciplined, and increasingly well-supplied. It moved heavy weapons by human labor, bicycle, rope, and sheer determination. Morale mattered as much as materiel. One side trusted technology and air support. The other trusted preparation, sacrifice, and the belief that time favored the side willing to endure. The route to the battlefield was itself a struggle. Roads were rough, skies were uncertain, and every ton of fuel, ammunition, or food had to overcome distance and weather. Aircraft were vital to the French position, but airfields are fragile things in war. Once the runway came under pressure, the entire fortress became harder to sustain. The terrain was steep, wet, and deceptive. What looked like open ground could become a killing zone, while ridges hidden by vegetation offered commanding views into the basin. Weather added another layer of difficulty. Monsoon rain turned roads to mud, softened earthworks, and made every movement slower, heavier, and more uncertain. French planning assumed the enemy would attack in a way that could be broken by concentrated fire. The other side planned a siege, not a quick assault, and that difference was decisive. The opening phase began with artillery and probing attacks on outlying positions. The valley, once imagined as a trap for the besiegers, started to become a trap for the besieged. Night after night, the hills changed hands in small, costly steps. Each position taken or lost altered the balance of observation, fire, and confidence. The pressure point was the airstrip and the central strong points around it. Once those were under sustained attack, resupply became harder and the defenders grew steadily more isolated. Artillery on the hills could reach deep into the basin. The French had expected to dominate with guns from below, but the higher ground had become the stronger position. As the siege tightened, supply drops became less reliable and wounded men had fewer options. The battle was no longer only about firepower. It was about sustaining a position under pressure. The decisive movement came as the attackers widened control across the surrounding heights. Each captured ridge made the next one easier to isolate and the central camp harder to defend. Communication, once clear enough to coordinate defense, became strained by shelling and exhaustion. In a siege, confusion can be as damaging as artillery. The final phase came quickly once the central positions were compressed. What had seemed like a fortified airhead became a shrinking pocket under relentless pressure. On the 7th of May, the French position collapsed. The surrender ended the battle, but its effects reached far beyond the valley floor. For many Vietnamese, the victory carried enormous symbolic weight. It showed that a colonial army could be defeated by a force rooted in local support and national purpose. For France, the defeat accelerated political change at home and abroad. The war's end would soon feed negotiations that redrew the map of Indochina. The battle also influenced military thinking worldwide. It became a cautionary example about underestimating terrain, supply, and an opponent willing to accept prolonged hardship. In the years that followed, Vietnam entered a new and still difficult era. Dien Bien Phu did not end conflict in the region, but it changed who could claim the initiative. Historians still debate the battle's alternatives and limits. They ask how much depended on French decisions, how much on Vietnamese preparation, and how much on the valley itself. Some interpretations emphasize command errors, while others stress logistics, morale, and the patient building of siege power. Most agree that no single factor explains the outcome alone. The battle remains important because it shows how wars are decided not only by bravery, but by geography, endurance, and the ability to organize under pressure. Those lessons still resonate. Today, Dien Bien Phu is a living place, not just a battlefield. Fields, roads, and neighborhoods now occupy ground once covered by trenches and artillery positions. Visitors can still sense the valley's scale and confinement. Standing there, it is easier to understand why both sides believed the terrain would serve their plans. The landscape has healed, but it has not forgotten. Earth, weather, and distance still define the place, even when the guns are long silent. Dien Bien Phu endures in memory because it was both local and global. A valley in Vietnam became a turning point in the history of empire, independence, and modern warfare. Its story is not only about victory or defeat, it is about the cost of misreading a landscape and the power of a determined plan carried through against long odds. In that sense, the battle still matters because it asks a lasting question. How much can strategy overcome, and how much must strategy respect the ground beneath it? The answer at Dien Bien Phu was written in mud, distance, and time. Those forces proved as decisive as any weapon.